Okay. Awesome. All
Cool.
right.
And so,
Well,
okay, tell me, where are you from originally? Because you're saying on in a really interesting way.
hmm.
Why do you say
Uh,
on like that?
well, how else do you say on?
On,
On?
on.
On?
You're saying like, I don't even know if I could do it. On.
On? On? It must be a Baltimore thing. I got
Okay.
this is a weird one, but I got in an Uber a few weeks ago. I was at which casino? It was Mohegan Sun, and
Uh-huh.
I jumped in an Uber, and within the first like 2 minutes, the guy was like, "You're from Baltimore," and I was like, "How do you know I'm from Baltimore?" But he was from Baltimore, and evidently we all talk the same, which I don't know if that's good or bad.
You also say Baltimore. Isn't it Baltimore?
It's Baltimore. It's Baltimore.
You
Crab
would know
cakes and
better. Yeah, you're from there. You would know better. I don't know. I'm just a crazy Canadian. People look at me weird down here all the time because I say things strange. But yeah, that's so interesting.
so from like in a part of your story is from Canada, and you came down
Mhm.
and you bought a franchise. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Like
correct.
how did that come together?
It was kind of just fate, I think, how it all worked out. Like so we bought our franchise. I don't even, they had just created the concept of this being a franchise. We were kind of like proof of concept. It was like a handshake deal. My husband, I think, even negotiated, like, we bought our franchise on December 31st, 2008. And the exchange rate wasn't great, the Canadian American exchange rate. And so he made some sort of like deal with them that we would buy the franchise now, but wait for 6 months to kind of like play the exchange rate and buy it, like pay for it when our exchange rate was better. It was like, it wasn't, when you buy a Soccer Shots franchise now, it's not like that. It's very, I'm sure they have like lawyers involved and it's all legit, but it was not, it was a handshake and kind of like a friendship kind of deal.
Interesting. And like how did you find that franchise? Like was it something, were you passionate? It's soccer, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So
It's
Soccer Shots is a children's soccer program for 2 to 8 year olds. It's non-competitive skills training and character development through the platform of soccer. So my husband grew up overseas. His mom's American and his dad's Canadian, and he grew up in Peru, in the middle of the jungle. So like little Tarzan, and obviously in Peru and in pretty much every other country in the world, soccer is very popular. It's a way of life in South America, especially. And so he grew up playing it, loved it, actually came up to Canada to go to university. He played for his university team. So he's always been very passionate about soccer. I am. My children are now too. We're a soccer family. But at the time, the reason why we bought it was, one, yeah, he did love soccer and he thought that would be a cool job and something that would be really interesting for him to do. But it was sort of, we were at a fork in the road. Like, we were living in Canada, newly married. He actually had a health crisis. So he was working up north, way up in northern Canada on the oil fields. It was like -40 with the wind chill. His boots were rated to -100. And he came home. He went up a couple of winters and he came home with some really strange symptoms, neurological symptoms, physical symptoms. We were getting him tested. And at first, they misdiagnosed him with ALS, which was terrifying. We were in our late 20s, early 30s. I was pregnant with our first child. And then we did more testing and found out he has Raynaud's disease. So it's a circulatory disease, where your cord tries to preserve itself by not pumping blood to the extremities. And it's induced by cold weather and stress. So the specialists were essentially like, you need to get an indoor job or move to a warmer climate. And so we were kind of at a fork in the road at that point. We were in North Carolina visiting his folks for Christmas. A childhood friend was there. And then he told us about his buddies that he had played professional or semi-professional soccer with. They were starting this Soccer Shots idea, and asked us if we wanted to partner with him and go in on it. And yeah, that was the beginning of this interesting, wild ride that we've been on. That was 15 years ago. So now we own six Soccer Shots franchises here in Orange County, California. We own 2 on Oahu, Hawaii. So we go back and forth, and we have about 10,000 children a year who play in our programming. It's an international franchise. There are hundreds of owners across the US and Canada, and just an amazing community to be a part of. Great franchise. And it's been a really special experience for us being part of the story from the beginning, essentially throughout, the beginnings of the franchise and being part of franchise development. It's been a really fun process. And it's just been a wild ride.
And probably an easy ride, and an overnight success, and,
Yeah, sure.
and everything happened exactly as you had planned.
Of
So
course.
I think that you started EOS in 2014, or some sort of self-implementation. So what happened between 2009 and 2014 in the business or around the business where you were
Yeah.
like, we need something?
A lot of pacing in the backyard. That's what happened. So we started our business during the recession, during the housing crisis in 2008. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I really think that the most successful and resilient businesses are started during hard times, but there was far from easy. There was nothing easy about it. I also had 4 kids in 5 years during those startup years. So just to make matters just a little more complicated, why not have a handful of kids while you're trying to start up a business in a new country that you're trying to figure out and you're trying to immigrate to? It just, perfect storm. There were a lot of late night pacing in the backyard. There was probably like a trail where my husband did this circle, just trying to figure it all out. But we're gritty, resilient, entrepreneurs that throw things at the wall, see what sticks. Neither of us graduated with an MBA. So we're always trying to figure it out. That's kind of our motto, just figure it out. So that's what we were doing. We're going along to get along and learning from our mistakes, growing by our reputation. But we knew there was a better and easier way to run a business. We just didn't know what that was. And we were part of a mastermind group within the Soccer Shots community that our good friend Tim O'Neill, who is now actually an EOS implementer based out of Ohio, he worked internally for Soccer Shots franchising. And he started this group of some of the top owners. It was like the top 10 or top 20. And he gave us the book Traction. So all of the owners in the community that were, at the top of the pack read Traction. And it was a game changer for a lot of us. For us, certainly, it was that light bulb moment. So we started implementing the tools and disciplines in our business. And that was a decade ago. So we're repentant, reformed self-implementers.
Yeah.
We did it. It's definitely the long, slow, hard way. I can speak from experience, but just even reading the book and implementing the tools and disciplines, there's nothing hidden. It's all in the book. So just doing the things that we did, even though we were using EOS tools. And I think there's a big difference between running on EOS and using EOS tools. But just the foundational tools that we were using right from the jump changed everything for us. So we actually went from we were at about $500,000 gross revenue at that point when we started using the EOS tools. And in less than 2 years, we broke through that $1 million gross revenue ceiling. And then, and that's kind of a big mile marker for us here in our community. So once we did that, then we just kept using EOS and kept growing. And we became the franchise rockstar of the year for the giving back category and recognized by FBR. That's a pretty big deal in our community. And then, we were growing and we had pretty good stride, and then COVID happened. And as you can imagine, when the schools shut down, Soccer Shots went away. So we did 2% of our gross revenue in the 2 quarters following the lockdown, as the same quarters of the previous year. So we shrunk by 98%. Our business was basically gone overnight. So we used the EOS tools to come back when things started opening up. We just kept going, did what we always did. And we actually so we went from 0 to clawing our way back. And in less than 2 years, we doubled our business than what it was pre-COVID. So so it's worked really well for us. And because I have this firsthand experience using EOS in my own business, I'm super passionate about what it can do for other people.
Yep. And you mentioned something that that I've never heard before, and I'd love to dig into this a little bit. You said there's a difference between running on EOS and using EOS tools. What does that
Correct.
mean?
So, you can DIY this. You can do it yourself, and there's no shame in that game. Read the book, use the tools. They're there for anyone to use, and I use them. I'm an implementer. I'm a one-woman show. I use them in my own. I run my own business on EOS. I'm my own implementer. We run our family on EOS, so you can use the tools. So there's that, but then running on EOS, when you use an EOS implementer to guide you through the EOS proven process, it's like night and day. So both are legitimate ways of using EOS, using traction, implementing it in your business. But using EOS tools and running on EOS are two different things from my perspective.
Got it. And so when you and your husband were creating these pacing circles in the backyard, what were like some of the things that were like keeping you up at night in the early
Mhm.
days?
Yeah. So at the time, we actually owned Soccer Shots Miami and Soccer Shots Orange County. So we owned these two businesses, two locations on either side of the country. And when we were in Orange County, we didn't know what was going on in Miami. And when we were in Miami, we didn't know what was going on in Orange County. And it was so stressful, just like not knowing what was going on in your business. We had no way of really measuring culture. We had no way of really understanding what the big issues were until they were train wrecks, until there were fires to put out. We weren't having effective and efficient meetings. The two teams weren't collaborating together. It was just really disjointed, disorganized, chaotic, and it certainly felt that way. So we just needed some balance and some restoration and efficiency, effectiveness in our business, and that's what it gave us.
Got it. And so back then, so you said Miami and LA. Did you have like were you operating with kind of GMs in both places, or were you guys running
Correct.
back
Yeah.
and forth playing? Okay,
Yeah, so we didn't have a leadership team per se. We looking back like we did and we didn't, it wasn't defined. Nobody was really accountable. Ultimately, my husband was, the boss, and we had teams on in both locations, and we had directors, like directors of coaching, directors of operations, but there was just no cohesiveness, and there was no, that visionary integrator duo that's especially that integrator that's the glue that holds everything together. Like that just wasn't a factor for us, and so it was just really chaotic.
got it, got it. And so now you get into self implementing, and now you're breaking targets, or you're breaking through those glass ceilings, and you've gone from 500,000 to a million. Like what
Mhm.
was it, those kind of specific issues, the cohesion, the integrator, the getting everybody on the same page, like what really changed during that process?
I think in those years, the thing that changed was bringing an integrator in. So we hired an integrator. There's a great assessment called a crystallizer assessment. It's on the EOS website. And my husband did it. And no surprise, he's like a 98 visionary, off the charts. He's a quick 10 quick start, visionariest of all visionaries. Like he didn't even need to take that. Anyone who has ever met him could tell him his results. But we were unsure about what I was. And so I took the crystallizer assessment, and I really like, I think there's a spectrum, and I wasn't really either of them. I wasn't really a visionary, and I wasn't really an integrator. And so became very apparent to us that we needed to hire an integrator, someone who was specifically wired that way. So we literally took the description of what an integrator is out of the book Rocket Fuel, copy pasted it. I think we put it on Craigslist, and we found an integrator. We actually had hundreds of candidates, and then we narrowed it down to, like our top 5, top 3, and then we found Nancy. So Nancy's our integrator. She's a rock star integrator. She's been with us for almost a decade. And
Wow.
yeah, and she really is the glue that holds everything together. So she has been with us since then, since 2018, 2017, around there. And before we hit the million. So, and then she was really integrating the two teams. At that time, we owned Miami and Orange County, and she integrated those two leadership teams together to make one leadership team that she really essentially held together. And then we split. We had a business partner. He took Miami, we took Orange County, and she ran Orange County solely as our integrator for a while, and then became fractional during COVID because, everything fell apart. And now we own Oahu, and we have one leadership team, and she runs both of them cohesively.
Wow. And when you were searching for, actually, let's start with this.
Yeah.
How does a business know when they are ready for an integrator? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that would say the business is running me,
Yeah.
or like I'm all over the place operating the business. And there's probably a lot of people that look at this and maybe they've read Rocket Fuel and they're like, I need an integrator, but maybe they're not at the right revenue levels.
Right.
Like, how would a company know when they are ready to bring on an integrator?
I think when you think that you're ready, it's too late. You should have probably hired an integrator a long time ago. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's when you feel like your business is controlling you, like your business is running you and you're wearing too many hats. That's when you need someone to come in and help organize the chaos and be that glue that holds everything together. So yeah, I think it's different for everybody. And obviously, like, cash flow, revenue, all of that really depends, or you're hiring the integrator is dependent on, where you're at and what you can afford. But there are a lot of great options out there. There are fractional integrator services now that will help you find an integrator that will be the perfect match for you, and, and in your budget and what you need them for. And I think it's not a one size fits all situation, but I think that it's probably too late by the time you're thinking, oh, I really need an integrator now. It was probably like 6 months ago or a year ago that you needed one.
That's so interesting. Like, because one of the things, like hidden gems in there is um, when you went out and you self-implemented EOS and you went out and you found an integrator, like that's when you unlocked hyper growth. Like
Sure.
that's when you
Yep.
guys really started taking off. And it's one of those things where like you may not think you're ready, but by going out there and finding the perfect person, like they will help you take your vision and take your business to that next level.
Right. There's that saying, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So what do you want? What are you going to do? Like, are you going to just keep doing the same thing like a hamster on a wheel and expect a different outcome? Like, you have to, bite the bullet and make the big change if you want to see some significant growth.
And so you made the decision that it's time for an integrator. We need to bring someone in that can help us with this business. What were you looking for, like at that point? Like you said this was somewhere, I think, around 2014,
Yeah.
2015 when you were doing this. Like integrators wasn't as prevalent as it is today. I still don't see necessarily integrators on a whole bunch of LinkedIn profile job titles, but certainly 10 years ago, most people didn't even know what an integrator was. And so, like, how did you know what you were looking for?
Yeah. We read Rocket Fuel, and I think that was very illuminating for my husband, especially. He is a visionary, and reading that book it liberated him to be who he truly is wired to be. I think he always thought, to be a good entrepreneur, you paid your bills on time and you pulled permits on time and you did all of this like execution stuff perfectly. And he would go to these meetings, especially with some other Soccer Shots owners, and he'd look around the room and be like, I'm not a real entrepreneur. Like, I'm not a good business owner because I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. Then he found out later on that those same people were looking at him thinking like, I'm never going to be as good as Joe Ben. I'm never going to be that, boss because I don't come to the table with 20 new ideas. I'm not thinking about like the industry disrupting idea. So like, who am I? Like, I'm never going to be that. And so I think that my husband was reading that book, he was able to see himself for who he truly is and accept himself for how he's wired and be like, oh, I don't have to be good at those things. Like, I have a counterpart out there who can be good at those things, and that will liberate me or elevate me to be working within my unique ability or my working genius so that I can do what I'm best at, and I can make sure that all of these people keep their jobs, have jobs, because the visionary is going to be that one person on the team who is so future forward thinking that that he sees things coming in the distance or coming at us that we don't even see. And it really liberated him to be able to do that. And then, when we were looking for an integrator, we were looking for someone who would be that ideas filter. So the great thing that Nancy does for my husband, Joben, is that she will say, like, he'll come to a meeting with 20 new ideas, and she'll have him feel seen and heard and validated. And she'll, in the best way, be like, you know what? Those are all really great ideas. We're going to put these 19 ideas on the long-term issues list, and we're going to go with this one right here. We're going to come up with a great plan to execute on this idea because this is the one. And these ones are going to be like Q3 or Q4 ideas. And he's totally good with that. And then when Q3 or Q4 rolls around, he's forgotten about those things because he's distracted by the next shiny object. So it's that person like who is able, they're a dynamic duo, and it's really cool to see. And she's able to sort of be that like ideas filter. That's how I look at her anyway. And it's been a really interesting dynamic to watch unfold.
And when you went out and you found this amazing integrator, like, did they already have integrator experience, or was it too new at that point where, it was like an idea filter, here's the system we're using? Did you have to train them up at the same time, but you knew that they already had the qualities and skill set?
Yeah, I think we knew and she knew that she had the qualities and the skill set. She had managed teams. She had worked in corporate America. She had run her own business. She had a photography business at some point. So we knew that she had the skill set and the ability to step into this role, but it definitely was like a learn as you go kind of thing. But it's been a fun process along the way, for sure. We've all learned and grown a lot.
That's amazing. So let's fast forward to COVID. So at this point, the business is really taken off. You've got the right people in the right seats, and then 2020 comes around, COVID hits, and all that is 98% gets washed away. Like, what's going through your brain? What are you doing, and how are you thinking at that point?
Yeah, I mean, we were just taking it day by day. It was really interesting being part of this larger community, right? Like, so Soccer Shots is a franchise system that's all across the US and Canada. So we had this really unique perspective as a business owner, seeing other business owners who essentially are living our same life in other parts of the country, running their businesses and being affected very differently by what was going on. So we were able to, at first we were having town hall meetings every day, every other day, and then it was every week and every other week. So as a community, we really came together, supported each other, and collaborated and learned how we could, what our next steps were and what to do next. And that was really beneficial being part of that community. But we were just taking it day by day. It was just, it was a scary time, and it was unsettling, and, the unknown was definitely frightening. But my husband and I have a really great partnership. We're partners in business, in life, in parenting, in everything that we do. So we just relied on each other and our friends and our family and our faith, and just got through it. And yeah, we knew, I think at the beginning it was dealing with the angry parents. When people get scared, sometimes that fear turns or comes out as anger. So that was unsettling, not fun. But after that kind of like wave and trying to, figure out what what we were all doing and what our next steps were and coming up with a plan to come back from it. We just waited it out. And when we reopened, it was pretty seamless. It was pretty easy to just kind of like fall back into our rhythm. And like I said, we used the EOS tools and it really helped us come back with a vengeance.
Yeah, and that's like one of the things that I've picked up on your story is like you didn't just come back and kind of do where you were before. Like you guys came out of this and started thriving. Like was it kind of market dynamics? Was it crystallized focus? Like what really kind of drove the coming out swinging?
There's this tool that we teach in EOS called a clarity break. And I feel like that COVID time was like one long clarity break. And I think, like you said, like it was that focus. We came out of that really tough time. And I think because we started in tough times, we were like, you know what? Like, that song started from the bottom, now we're here. Like
Yeah.
we felt like we had gone through that. Like when we felt like we were at the top of our game right before COVID hit. And so we were kind of like, whatever, like this is just another bump in the road. We just have to get through this and like claw our way back. And we did it once before, we can do it again. So I think that, there's something to be said about being like hitting rock bottom or like being at the bottom. And it kind of like produces this thing inside of you where like, you've been there, so you're not really scared of it, so we came out of it and we were just laser focused. And I feel like we are so resilient that we really felt like nothing could touch us. And we just made it work. We figured it out.
Did anything change coming out? Like, the notion of a scorecard or quarterly rocks, or when we talk about focus, like hyper focus on kind of on the next phase of the business or the coming out of COVID. Did you wind up like changing anything, any of the systems, the processes, the metrics on the back end?
Yeah, so our core values, our core focus, everything that is integral to who we are at Soccer Shots did not change. We were the same organization coming out of COVID as we were before. But I think that the new resolve was like creating smarter goals, like thinking bigger picture, coming out of it and being like, okay, like if this happened, anything could happen. So our SWOT analysis was definitely, elevated, I would say. So those types of things changed. I think more like execution changed. Who we are integrally did not change, but I think our resolve and our way of thinking as far as execution was concerned really changed.
Got it. And when you talk about like SMART goals,
Mm-hmm.
did the goals become bigger and more ambitious, or did the goals become more specific and intentional?
I think both. I think we really got focused on what we wanted and created. I think that maybe, it's just kind of hitting me now. Maybe going through that together created a higher level of trust than we had before. We really we had to rely on our people and they had to rely on us in new ways. Being creative with SBA loans and like making promises about like what would happen when we come back, and really like leaning on each other for all of our livelihoods. And I think maybe like our trust increased as people, as humans on a team together. And so coming back, like maybe we were able to be more open and honest than we were ever before. And I guess as a result, then that's what created this ability on our team to be able to make more intentional, smarter, bigger goals.
Yep. I love that. Like this whole notion of trust and candor and vulnerability, and the power that can really have for making a team the most productive and just like, I don't know, effective executioners. There's something to that.
Mm-hmm. I think that behavior is a language. And when you tell people something. There's this saying like, don't tell people something if you can show them. And we showed them who we were as people, and they showed us who they were as far as loyalty was concerned. And so I think that in that experience, all of us showing each other through our behavior who we all were, just really up-leveled that trust. And yeah, and it just increased the vulnerability, the open and honest, and the candor on our team. So for us, like, I would not want to go back and do it again, but I think that there are silver linings in any situation, in any circumstance in life. If you look back, you can probably find something that you can take away from as a lesson learned or a takeaway. And for me, that was a big takeaway. And I can see that increase of trust on our team because of that situation and that circumstance that we all went through.
Yep. And I never thought about EOS and the process of EOS inside of franchises and owning multiple franchises. And you are now the second person that I've talked to that preaches EOS with multiple franchises. Like, because I never considered, like, how do you set an accountability chart, like ownership over kind of multiple places? So like, how have you been able to kind of effectively roll EOS out into almost, I mean, very similar, it's the same exact business, but into multiple locations? Like how did you do that?
Yeah. So I have to say that about a third of the Soccer Shots franchises use EOS tools. There are many self-implementers in our Soccer Shots community. So out of, I think there's about 150 owners, I think a third of them are self-implementing. They did a poll, and so I know these numbers because I saw this recent poll. The franchisor, they actually just started working with an EOS implementer this year. So the franchisor runs on EOS, which is, I think, integral to the entire franchise system getting on board with it. So that's been, I think, crucial. And then also, there are a handful of Soccer Shots businesses that are using an EOS implementer. Like myself, I actually work with Soccer Shots Sacramento, Soccer Shots Inland Empire North. So I work with some other Soccer Shots businesses outside of my own business as their business coach. So so I've been able to have this perspective, of my franchisor self-implementing, my franchisor working with an implementer, my own business being on both sides of that. So it's been a really interesting experience to sort of observe like how things play out. But I don't think it's as complicated as you think. Like, it's really just a business. And for us, so we look at our franchises. Our Orange County franchises are one business, and our Oahu franchises are one business. And then they're sort of two businesses that are branches, and they run under one leadership team. So the accountability chart looks like we have one visionary, one integrator, and then we have director of finance, director of operations for Oahu, a director of operations for Orange County, and then sales and marketing. And the sales and marketing, essentially, I know they're two different markets, but we have the same target market potential client or customer. It's a mom of a 2 to 8-year-old. So they're selling to preschool directors, whether they're here in Orange County or on Oahu. And so there's a lot of crossover. So it's not really as complicated as you think.
That's actually like a huge nugget. Because when I was talking about this with someone else, I think the struggle there was how do you set up kind of the independent locations within the accountability chart? And for their business model specifically, there were some challenges that were specific to that industry. Mm-hmm. But you just made it crystal clear where, like, you've broken down the operations functions by the actual location. Right. So you have like multiple people filling the operations seat, but it's within each of their respective locations. That's really good.
Right. We kind of look at them like territories, right? So that's how we break it up, and we run it under one umbrella, one leadership team, and that's what works for us. So, yeah, it's been a really simple and effective experience doing it that way for us.
How many, like, do you think that this is scalable to 5, 10 locations? Like, is this something that you can just kind of in a franchise model, and it doesn't have to be Soccer Shots. It could be any franchise model, but the way that you have it set up right now, that it's brilliant. Like, is that scalable to, I have 5 locations, therefore, it's just an independent kind of operations bucket for 5 different locations.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that especially now with the technologies that we have, like coming out of COVID now, everybody has a Zoom account, we're all set up to be able to work remotely. And so I think that that's how it works, is that doesn't really matter how many locations you have or where you are, as long as you can keep that meeting cadence, and meeting remotely is a way that you can do that. As long as you have that implemented in your business, then I think that it could work.
That's interesting. And one of the things that we had talked about, and there's a lot of like hot takes on this concept of fractional integrators. So I've heard, when we talk about fractional service, I had first learned about fractional in a Vistage group, and we had someone in there that ran a fractional leadership agency. We had used at least 3, if not 4, fractional leaders inside Hunt to Killer as we were scaling. It was one of the reasons that we were able to scale as fast as we did without falling apart. What's been surprising to me since exiting Hunt to Killer has been, a lot of people don't really know what fractional means or what fractional is. Like, it gets confused a lot with either staffing or consulting, and that's in my view, that's not what fractional is. Fractional is really about like someone that's fully integrated into the culture. There's just not 40 hours of work for them each week. Therefore, you don't have to, but they have just as much ownership, and sometimes they have skin in the game. And so you've had what sounds like pretty big success in this fractional integrator world. Like, how did you get into this fractional leadership, and how do you make it work?
Yeah, so bottom line is, when COVID happened, like, the money ran out, right? So we told Nancy, look, you've been working for us for a handful of years. You're integral to our business. You are the glue that holds everything together. So we will stop paying ourselves before we stop paying you. Like, we're holding on to you as long as humanly possible. But at some point, like, if things don't reopen, there's nothing we can do. So, my husband and Nancy and we're kind of affectionately like we're a throuple, not in the weird way, but like, we really do life together. The 3 of us, we are in business together. We're good friends. And so when COVID happened and everything shut down and our jobs went away, we all came together and we were like, okay, what's plan B, C, D, E, F for all of us? So Nancy, being a professional photographer, she took headshots for us. She like helped us, I hadn't had a resume for, since I was a teenager. So I didn't even know what LinkedIn was. She's like, you got to start a LinkedIn profile. You got to put your headshots on there. And she really helped us kind of set us up in case Soccer Shots never came back. Right. And then we said to her, like, we're going to help set you up with your plan B, C, D, E, F. And so her plan B was to go fractional. And so there were other businesses in other industries that weren't really affected like we were by the pandemic. And so she was able to then step into their businesses and do that work for them. And you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's being a fractional leader isn't about number of hours spent. Like, having a seat on the accountability chart often doesn't equal out to be 40 hours a week, right? Like, we're in entrepreneurial businesses. There is no like 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. So for Nancy, she was able to step into businesses and kind of create like a menu list for them, and they could pick and choose what they needed from her. And she was able to kind of craft these hours in these different businesses to compile this full-time job for her. And then she actually was working less hours and making more money than when she was on salary just solely with working for us, which was incredible for her. She has a special needs son, and she was able to spend more time with him, make more money, help more people. So it worked out really well. That being said, I don't think being a fractional integrator is the be all and end all. I don't think that that's the answer. Ultimately, for a business, I think that having an integrator in the day-to-day full-time is what is best for the business. But if you're short on cash, if there are circumstances that, are happening where you can't afford to have a full-time integrator in place, a fractional integrator is a really great band-aid. It's a great solve for a time being. And it works out really beautifully for some people. So I advocate for it. I know that there are some people in the community who throw shade on the idea, but when you see it work, like I have in my own life, then you can't help but advocate for it and root for it, because it really is a really great solve for a lot of people in a time of need.
Yeah. And when society reopened, her name's Nancy, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Did Nancy come back and as a full time, or did Nancy come back and realize like, holy crap, I can be an integrator across your business and across their business, and I can do this. I can help more than just one person out, even though like we're out of COVID, or society is reopening.
Right.
What capacity did they come back in?
Yep. She actually never came back full time like she was before. She always stayed fractional with us. And this past year at our annual planning meeting, we discussed that we are at a point where we need a full-time integrator again. So we're kind of in this transition time where we had that tough conversation with Nancy, and we're very close and open and honest. And so she was like, I don't think that's for me at this stage in my life, in this season. And so she's actually training up our director of operations on Oahu to be the new integrator incoming when she transitions out. So we just kind of reassess like every quarter, every year, like where are we at? What do we need? What does the business need? How do what is this working for you? What's working, what's not working? And so I would just say, it's a fluid thing. It's ever evolving. And so we've just kind of come to a point now where we've all agreed like it's a time of transition, and she's going to be transitioning out and working fractionally with other businesses. But we're at the point where we need someone to be here full time.
One of the questions I get asked a lot is where do I find an integrator? And you just said something, and I wanted to talk about it just for a brief second, which is you said you found your integrator inside of the business. It's currently someone that's running operations for one of the other franchises.
Correct. Yep.
So like that's a part of like what I say is like start looking internally. Like you might actually have someone internally, and was this an epiphany? Was this an aha? Or did you just know, like, you're like, we have it. It's just a matter of when the time's right.
I think that's one of the cool things about the EOS tools is that they show you like our accountability chart, and our VTO really showed us where we were going and what we needed, what was coming next, because, we're always taking another look at the accountability chart and reassessing like what it's structure first, people second, right? So what structure do we need for this organization for the next 6 to 12 months? So in reworking our accountability chart, we realized what we needed, and then having those leaders in the room, they saw where they could fit into that picture. So I think it was using those EOS tools, the VTO, having that like where we're going long term, and then having that seat on the accountability chart that was empty. We saw it, they saw it, everyone internalized it, understood it, and wanted to be a part of it. And so we were able to then have those discussions internally, and we didn't have to look outside of our organization. There are a lot of great places that you can look outside of your organization for an integrator. There are integrator firms that will match you with an integrator, talent services that will help you find somebody outside of your organization. But if you have somebody in your organization who's a fit for your culture, they fit your culture like a glove, then if you can find a seat for them, you want to keep them around, right? So that's what we ultimately did, and we're super thankful that we've been able to do that.
And what do you look for? What qualities, what skill set? Like, you obviously know that this person's going to be successful. And so like what things are they demonstrating where you're like, that person is going to make a great integrator, like specifically integrator, not just fill in this block, but like they need the shot and they're going to be successful. Like what kind of qualities were you evaluating for?
Yeah. So we're looking for somebody who manages people well, right? Like this is the person that is the glue that holds everything together. And by everything, I mean the people. We're nothing without our people, right? And so, Nancy is affectionately called Mama Nancy by our employees. So we employ 18 to 24-year-olds typically. We have almost 100 soccer shots coaches between all of our territories, and they call her Mama Nancy because she is nurturing. And she, these are kids who are writing college papers, and they're, soccer shots is not the be all and end all for them. We know that they're moving on to bigger and better things, and we really like guide them and help them through that process, and we're there for them every step of the way while they're here with us. And Nancy has been a terrific, wonderful, amazing mentor and leader to these kids. And so, she's affectionately called Mama Nancy, but she's a pioneer. She is, she's a tough Latina woman who she doesn't take any, what. And so the fact that they call her Mama Nancy, knowing how she is and who she, how she's wired, is a real testament to how she manages people and how she shows up as a leader. So I think that is like what we were looking for. And funnily enough, we found another mom who's in her 40s, she's not a Latina, but she's Filipino. And she really along the same lines, she has that fire in her. She doesn't take anything from anyone. She knows how to get people set straight, and she's she has kids, and she knows how to get people in line, but in a way that makes you feel nurtured and cared for and seen and loved. And so I think for us, we were looking for that balance. And then just going through that checklist of what makes an integrator, Lonnie, our new integrator who's coming on board and is training up under Nancy, she hit all those points just like Nancy did. So just how they are, how they're wired internally, but also how they show up for people is huge for us.
Yeah. I love how you used the integrator that you have in the seat now as a template. It's worked so well that you were able to kind of build this template based upon their qualities, their skill sets, their expertise, and put together that model, and then kind of put that model up with other people and say who inside of the organization fits. I love that. Because hiring is hard. Hiring is one of the it's the hardest thing. It's the biggest thing that we struggled with at Hunt to Killer. When you get it right, things just fall into place. And when you don't, things are not well. And so I love that you had such a great integrator that you were able to build that. And then you had someone internally that fit the bill. So that's awesome.
It is awesome.
So if someone listening to this right now is oh my gosh, I need to meet Amanda. I want Amanda to be a part of, or be an implementer for me. How would they find you?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. So I'm kind of known in the implementer community as the most social media savvy of them all. So you'll find me everywhere. If you look up Amanda Barkey EOS, you'll see me on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm all over the place. So find me all over social media, but you can email me at amanda.barkey@eosworldwide.com. And I'd love to connect. So reach out and let's get you rocking and rolling.
That's awesome. And to your point of the technology and the social media, you're the only one that I've had on the show that has their own headphones and an amazing microphone. So you're demonstrating that skill right now. One last question: if you could have a beer with any EOS implementer, who would it be?
Oh, Gino, for sure. I mean, if I could sit down and have a beer with Gino, I think that it would just be a riot. We'd have a blast. And he's just, he's the goat in this whole microcosm, this universe, this orange bubble. So I would love to sit down and have a beer with him. Maybe one day it'll happen.
There it is. Awesome. All right.